There is so much complication in attachment theory. There are loads of different attachment researchers. They use different words to mean the same things. The basic thing that we need to remember is
these patterns are so ingrained that we don't even see them. So how do you start to uncover what your pattern is if you're sat here thinking, well, I don't know what my pattern is?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is to have kindness and compassion for all the attachment patterns, because they're often things that we develop in childhood, and they're the best way we can find to deal with the situation that we're born into. There's a lot of problems around this. You can do a quick online questionnaire. I've met so many people that have done a quick online questionnaire, but the problem is they're probably going to be wrong.
Right.
And if you do a quick online questionnaire and it tells you you're this, then you might go off and be like, well, I'm this. And so I'm like, let's say I do a 2-minute questionnaire and I'm like, well, I'm secure, so my partner's the problem.
Yeah.
Or I think I'm this and they're that, and that's the answer. Whereas it's just not as straightforward as that at all. And even within the different kind of formal classifications, there's loads of shades of grey. And so you can be one type with a bit of the other. You know, it's not, researchers are trying to move away from neat categories because I don't think it's necessarily that helpful. So I wouldn't recommend going off and doing a quick online test, because it is, the lens you see yourself through can sometimes be unhelpful.
Yes.
And put yourself into boxes, and we're not reducible to little boxes. There's a compulsivity to some of attachment patterns. So like the way I think I figured out that some of my ways of being weren't helpful was when I was hit by a car and I was left bedbound, and my way was to not ask for help, to be really independent, and to not try to rely on others. But sometimes life will come along and go, this problem is too big for you to deal with on your own. So sometimes other stuff will come along, or sometimes you might just notice, you know, that the story of your relationships is recurring, and maybe there's something that you want to explore in that. I mean, I think a good way to kind of figure it out is to learn about it. But unfortunately with attachment theory, there's a lot out there that's incorrect.
Yes, I'm imagining. Well, this is it, but the internet is a brilliant place, but it's also broad, and there's lots out there, and you've got to really be picky and choosy about where you're getting your information from. And I'm guessing it's not very helpful also just to find the dead end of, I'm going to blame my childhood and blame my parents or my caregivers. That's not necessarily helpful.
No, and a lot of attachment researchers have kind of really warned against parent blaming, because we know from a lot of research that your environment and your context impacts your parenting. So in one study that followed single mums for when they were pregnant, they followed their babies for 40 years, they found that when they had more social support, their kids' mental health improved. And you can't look at children without looking at their families, and you can't look at their families without looking at the wider context. In that study, when parents or when the mums faced more adversity, the insecure attachment was more likely, and when the parents had less adversity, secure attachment was more likely. So often what's the case is that parents are doing the best they can, and that is taking into account what they had growing up. If they didn't have a safe haven growing up, then they don't have that scaffolding in place to know how to do it themselves when they're a child. Parenting is hard. It's so hard. It's asking you to do so many things all at once, to regulate yourself, to contain your own emotions, to think from your child's point of view, to multitask beyond belief, to manage exhaustion. We didn't evolve to parent in tiny little groups. We evolved to operate in communities. You cannot look at attachment in isolation.
Yeah, and these nuclear families, it's so commonplace now that that's how we raise children, and it is obviously becoming problematic in lots of different ways. As you've just mentioned, environment is key. It's a really huge part of how we raise our kids. Not parking that or putting it to one side, but generally, how can we parent in a healthy way to raise kids that have a healthy attachment pattern?
So I think the first thing is to make sure that we have social support and the scaffolding around us of important people that can provide us with safe havens when we need it, and try and be in a place where we can accept the help of that safe haven when we need it. We used to think that resilience was something that kids just magically had as they were born, but we now know that it is born out of relationships. So to do the best that we can, we need to make sure we have the support around us. There is so much complication in attachment theory. There are loads of different attachment researchers. They use different words to mean the same things. The basic thing that we need to remember is your child needs you to provide them with a safe haven in times of crisis. And that means to be emotionally available and physically available, depending on the circumstances. So when they're young, they need more cuddles, and as they get older, a phone call might be enough. But if it's a really big thing, they'll still probably need you to be there physically. So those two things are availability, and then you need to be responsive, which means to help them in a supportive way. And if you can do that, then they will learn over and over again. And sometimes you'll get it wrong, and that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. But if you do it over and over again, your child will learn that there is someone there if they need them.
You mentioning there, repeating something, repeating an action, repeating behaviour as a parent or not. If you're just intrigued about your own pattern and you're willing to move down a new route because you know that pattern's not serving you, this is about creating a new pattern, and that takes repetition, and that takes a level of discipline and willingness to keep doing the same thing over and over again to move down a new route. And I think often discipline or repeating a pattern gets kind of sidelined for the quick fix. This is how you fix this relationship, this is how you fix yourself. But actually this is about repeating a more healthy behaviour to learn new habits.
So we're fed a lot about there's this ideal relationship, or all you need is to find the right other, and it's not about that. Yes, you do, I've already mentioned, you need to find people and get yourself surrounded by people who can provide you with a safe haven. But it's not just all about them. You also need to be able to take part in that as well. So it's a two-way thing, and it's also about your bigger context.
What can we do on a societal level to create healthier attachment?
We can encourage parenting interventions. There are some attachment-based parenting interventions that have shown to have a really positive impact years later. They're not that expensive. Insecure attachment costs money, so there's like a financial incentive to get that involved.
So what would that be, an intervention?
So one is called the ABC, and it involves 10 sessions with a coach. You get loads of feedback. You watch films of other people parenting, you are filmed parenting yourself, then you have to discuss that. You explore assumptions that you might have about parenting. For example, being harsh to your child helps them be tough, or too much love can spoil a child. And from attachment point of view, neither of those are true. So parenting interventions, but also I think just generally like a values change, like value childhood, because it has a big impact. Value parents, value all the people that work with children, and value important relationships. Educate children at school, so that there was one guy interviewed who had an extremely abusive father, and it was only in his 30s that he realised that the abuse wasn't about him. And there's stuff we can be doing with children to help them have an insight, so that they're not just blanket internalising all of this stuff and living with that kind of that awful thought processes, or like self-attribution for decades.
Yeah, that's self-loathing, and wow. So, I mean, this is a huge topic, and I am so keen to learn more because it is fascinating and seems to be the real bedrock of so much about our life and emotion. But to try and summarise it, we need better social support with parenting and families. We need to create safe havens. We need to be with other people that create that safety for us, and ditch the bad eggs.